And here we go, another edition of Sports Medicine Weekly. Welcome, and everybody. I'm Steve Kashul, Chicago Bulls radio host. My co-host this week, filling in for Dr. Brian Cole, is Dr. Charles Bush-Joseph. He was the head team physician for the Chicago White Sox for 15 years. Still works with the White Sox as one of their team physicians from Midwest Orthopaedics at Rush. Also works with the Chicago Bulls and DePaul University, amongst other teams in our area. And an orthopedic surgeon. Doc, how are you?
I'm great, Steve. Happy to be here this morning.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to talk about skiing to kick the show off. When was the last time you skied? Do you ski at all?
You know, Steve, I skied for like 35 years, and I finally had to give it up. My wife gave it up 4 or 5 years ago, and I think I skied my last year. Unfortunately, a back injury knocked me off the mountain.
Really? How many years did you ski?
Many years, and I had a few injuries, and I think we're hopefully going to, our next guest is going to give us some ideas on how to prevent those.
Well, yeah, the topic is skiing to stay young. Let's bring on an athletic trainer for ATI Physical Therapy, Peter Braun, joining us from Glen Mills, Pennsylvania on this Saturday morning. How you doing, Peter?
I'm doing great. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Good. All right, my first question is what inspired you to write an article on this topic? Tell us about the article.
Yeah, so the article is titled, the anti-aging effects of skiing. Skiing has always been a real big passion of mine. I've been skiing for about 25 years, and but I honestly think the driving question behind, why I wrote this was aging. It's something we all can relate to. None of us aren't getting any younger. The inevitability of aging is definitely very interesting. And, I think we all get to a point in our lives where we start to realize, what we do when we're younger isn't necessarily what we can continue to do as we get older. So, if we look at this as just one tiny piece of the puzzle and trying to stay young, that's the least we could do.
Steve, one of the things for me, and Peter, maybe you can answer this, I always find that an exercise that's sustainable is one that is the best exercise for you. And that's why I think what you're trying to get here with skiing. If you enjoy skiing, it's such a physical activity. It's so fun and so exhilarating. You can do it forever. And so I guess one of the questions maybe some of your clients and patients may say to you, what level of proficiency do I have where I can ski safely? And how do I get to that next level? Or what are the keys for me to be an effective, sustainable, long-term skier?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think what's great about skiing and maybe makes it a little different than some other sports is that you're really able to limit yourself, by the slopes that you select, the challenges that present themselves on those hills, the speed at which you're going. If you really learn the craft and you develop your skills, you can advance yourself at your own speed and your own rate. So it's definitely something that you can pick up and develop over a very long period of time. And if you're using the right skills and techniques, then you could do it and do it safely, well into old age.
Visiting with Peter Braun, athletic trainer with ATI Physical Therapy. I'm Steve Kashul with Dr. Chuck Bush-Joseph, filling in this week for Dr. Brian Cole at his Sports Medicine Weekly. You brought up anti-aging, Peter. That's a pretty strong claim. What do you mean by this?
Yeah, so, the idea behind that claim is really to determine the factors that play a part in aging, and then obviously figuring out what can be done to address those factors, right? So, there's a lot of research out there. We know a lot of what aging can do to the body, both physiologically, anatomically, right? So there's a decrease in strength and muscle mass, right? We see changes in our cardiovascular system, and endothelial function, is compromised. Our vessels get a little stiffer. We get an increase in blood pressure. We have difficulties with balance. We see an increase in risks of falls and the associated injuries with those falls, and a decrease in bone density, right? Our bones get more brittle. So all of those kind of combine, along with a ton of other factors that go into it, but just really finding an exercise that can address, those different things that go along with getting older.
Peter, as we go from the winter ski season, now we're entering the spring ski season. What's different, and what do you advise your clients or our listeners?
Yeah, no, well, it gets a little warmer, right? Obviously, but the snow conditions do change. And when you're dealing with snow in the wintertime, it is colder. We can see ice, hard packed snow, also powder, all right? But in the spring, it does get a little heavier, a little slushier. It gets wetter. So there is some components with just balance, mainly, and how we're controlling our skis throughout the snow. The techniques that are involved in all that are very similar. There's not much change from winter to spring other than how we're controlling our edges and how we're using dynamics to guide our skis throughout the turn. So, when you're looking at an environment where you might see more ice, we want to keep our body weight over top of our skis a little more and not get them too far out from under us. And when you're dealing with nice hard pack corduroy, we can really get more dynamic. We can put more force through the ski, which will allow it to kind of create a nice sharper turn as we use the shape of the ski to our advantage.
Again, visiting with Peter Braun, athletic trainer with ATI Physical Therapy. Steve Kashul here with Dr. Chuck Bush-Joseph, filling in this week for Dr. Brian Cole. A pretty unique type of exercise skiing. Would you agree, Peter?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think in general, obviously, exercise is going to have a lot of positive effects on the body. I think some particular components to skiing that can really optimize the results we see from physical activity, right? So we talk about the cardiovascular system. Skiing's really a mix between, endurance type exercise and high intensity type exercise, right? So if we're, taking our time and having nice big round turns, we're slowly contracting the muscles, we're easing in and out, we're moving at a nice controlled pace, and that's more endurance. But when we increase that speed, we decrease our turn radius, we increase the frequency of our turns, we start to see our muscles work a lot harder, and we enter in like that high-intensity interval training zone. We also see, the effects it has on lower leg strength, which is a huge component in maintaining health over time, and just the complexity of a ski turn, the dynamics that are involved in order to really work a ski from top to bottom of the turn. And, you're using small muscles in your feet to really engage in edge, but your larger muscles, your core, to work and control the pressure on the ski throughout the turn. Balance is another big component. As soon as you put on the ski, your balance is already being challenged, right? And once you start going down the hill, we're challenging it dynamically. And then, as we were talking about before, with changes in snow conditions, with the slope of the hill, with how dynamic our turns are getting, we have to react with that balance. So that's really the biggest challenge we can see to improve our balance function is reactive dynamic balance. And that's a big component of skiing. And then overall bone density is really important. As we get older, bones get more brittle. And, the way we stress our bones in skiing is different than a lot of other sports that we see. So if we look at like long distance running or any type of running, the peak force on the bone happens very quickly, right at heel strike. That stress on the bone is really exposed drastically in a very short amount of time. But in a ski turn, we're slowly progressing that force through the beginning of the turn, and then that peak force is reached at the middle of the turn, and then actually goes back down slowly again toward the end of the turn. So we're still stressing our bone enough to see the effects and improve bone density over time, but we're not doing it in a way that can be detrimental because of the slow increase in peak force.
Great stuff, Peter. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks,
yeah,
Peter.
no problem. My pleasure.
Athletic trainer
Thanks for
for
having me.
ATI Physical Therapy. Skiing to stay young.